All right, so this is like a Sigep historic podcast, and I'm Avery Lupkis, a member of Sigep, and this is the Sigep historian, Scott Romiser.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so I just am super excited to talk about some of the history around Sigep and maybe what it means to be in a fraternity. I don't know. Let's figure this out. So why don't you tell me a little bit about Sigep's national history?
That's a great question. And before we start at November 1st, 1901, we must go back to 1737 at Yale University. That is where the first Greek-like organization, it was called Crotania, was formed. Um, and then in 1950 at the College of William and Mary, which is in Virginia, um, there was a organization called the FHC. It's not known what FHC stands for. It's assumed that it is some sort of a Latin phrase. However, people would call him the Fat Hat Club. Thomas Jefferson was actually a member of the FHC.
Really?
And this is actually a quote from him. It had no useful object. He didn't really find much use for it because essentially they would just go to a pub and drink and talk. That was it. That was the entire organization.
Really?
And because of this lack of structure, it did not survive the Revolutionary War. Fun fact. December 5th in 1776, at William and Mary College again, John Heath established Phi Beta Kappa Society. The reason he started this organization is because he was denied membership from the FHC. I thought that was pretty interesting, right?
Seems pretty petty.
Yeah, very petty. But his
something I would do.
Yeah, no, same. His organization was way more structured, and he used Greek letters as a symbol of their education. So back in the day, Latin and Greek were taught in college, and Latin and Greek were thought to be like the language of education. Like, I know the Greek alphabet, so I am educated. So that's why he used Phi Beta Kappa.
It's really interesting because I think you can still see that philosophy in law school because a lot of laws are written in Latin.
Yeah, exactly. And a bunch of like phrases for law are still in Latin. So yeah, it's very interesting. So in 1826 at Union College, the Kappa Alpha Society, Sigma Phi, Delta Phi were founded at Union College. This is in Schenectady, New York. Union College has this is known as the mother of fraternities because it actually produced 6 fraternities, and these fraternities were actually purely social. Phi Beta Kappa was not a social fraternity. It was mostly for education. So you would go there and you would talk about your classes and kind of what problems you were having and discuss pertinent topics.
So these fraternities were formed at this time. When was the first sorority founded? Do you know that?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. So in 1850, there were more women in college, and this is because of the Civil War. A lot of guys weren't able to go to college because they were either fighting or died. So in order for colleges to stay afloat, they started allowing more women to come in. And Pi Beta Phi, Alpha Phi, Kappa Alpha Theta, and Sigma Kappa, among other sororities, were formed around this time.
So only 25 years later, after the first real fraternities were formed, sororities were formed?
Yes.
That's crazy.
I know, it really is. I'm actually reading this book about Kappa Alpha Theta and how it was founded. I can't remember the name of it right now, sorry. But the whole reason they did it is because guys would come in wearing their pledge pins and think that they're better than everyone else. And the women were like, no, I want that respect. I want to have a group of people that I can talk with and be social with. It's very amazing how these started. I think it's very interesting. It really shows a lot about like the similarities between fraternity and sorority life now and fraternity and sorority life then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still very similar. Like, we're looking for that group of people we can be around.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about Sigep since we have a lot of the past caught up. Okay, so in 1900, Carter Ashton Jenkins transferred to Richmond College from Rutgers University. He was a member of Chi Phi at Rutgers and wanted to start a chapter at Richmond College. Um, so he sent in a request to the headquarters of Chi Phi, and he was denied because the university was too small and there were already 5 other fraternities on campus. So in 1901, Jenkins, with 5 other guys, wanted to form a new fraternity. So they met with the administration at Richmond College to become recognized. They wanted to be called Sigma Phi at Richmond College. The administration had 3 problems. There wasn't a need for a new fraternity because there were already 5 fraternities and only 300 students at the college. 7 of the 12 members of this hopeful Sigma Phi were seniors, and Sigma Phi was already a fraternity, which was actually founded at Union College. So Carter Ashton Jenkins replied, "This fraternity will be different. It will be based on the love of God and the principle of peace through brotherhood. The number of members will increase from undergraduate classes. We will change the name to Sigma Phi Epsilon." Pretty blunt, right?
Yeah.
What I think is awesome is this fraternity will be different is kind of like our motto now. And just to think that he literally said that in order for Sigma Phi Epsilon to become an organization, that it's just amazing to me. I love that.
I assume it's pretty difficult to even think about forming a fraternity, not to mention form a new fraternity on a campus where there's already 5 fraternities and 300 students,
Yeah.
because that would just be ridiculous. It's got to be difficult.
It is, and want to know something that's interesting? Another thing about his reply is different than the norm. So the numbers of members will increase from undergraduate classes. That didn't happen back then.
Really?
Yeah. So fraternities were mostly composed of juniors and seniors and graduate students. Yes.
So it was different. It was a
it was
completely new
completely
concept.
different. Yep, they were allowing freshmen and sophomores. Yeah.
So Sigep literally founded the concept of pledge classes, or that's crazy.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, right? So essentially, at that moment, November 1st, 1901, the fraternity that we all know and love was born. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's the history of our founding. What else can I tell you about Sigep?
I really feel like I have a good grasp on maybe what fraternities are as a whole, and maybe Sigep's national history, but this is the Kansas Epsilon chapter. So what can you tell me about our local history?
Oh, okay, perfect. So, long time ago, back March 9th, 1921, this guy named Grant Prestorius decided he wanted to form a new fraternity at ESC's campus.
Prestorius, that's a pretty funky last
Yeah,
name.
no, it is a pretty funky last name, right? We tried to find some information about him. Really, all we found was that he's buried in Lawrence, but yeah.
Interesting. I wonder what like his last name is. It sounds like it's some kind of...
Yeah, well, he has family that lives in South Africa. Don't ask me how we know that. We did a lot of searching, a lot of stalking, but yeah. So I'm assuming it's probably like British or something like that, because a lot of British people live in South Africa. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyways, so he founded a fraternity on campus called Phi Delta Chi. Okay. What's important to note is that the men that he founded this fraternity with were all World War I veterans. Yeah.
All of them?
All of them.
How many were there?
There were 7 at the beginning.
7 World War I veterans.
Yep. They all came together to form this new fraternity. So Phi Delta Chi grew, became one of the biggest fraternities on campus. It moved a lot of houses. If you look back in the Sunflower, I think they had like 8 house changes. It was not a good time for them. But in 1951, things changed. So Sigep during the 50s was growing, okay? And this was because there was a need for housing for students. There was a large influx of students in the 1950s because of the GI Bill, which was introduced after World War II. So Sigep was sweeping the country looking for places to start new chapters. Now, sometimes they would just colonize a new chapter. Other times they would sort of, what's the word, transition an existing chapter into a Sigma Phi Epsilon. And that's exactly what happened with Phi Delta Chi. February 10th, 1951, there was this large ceremony at the Broadview Hotel, and Phi Delta Chi died, and Sigma Phi Epsilon, the Kansas Epsilon chapter, was reborn.
The Broadview Hotel?
Yeah,
The
it's
same-
where the apartments are now.
The Broadview Towers, actually, on top of that building, there's a airplane spotting station
Really?
for the during the Cold War to spot incoming bomber planes.
Wow, that's amazing.
Now it's used for weather surveying.
Hey,
so.
that's better than airplane spotter, I guess. Yeah. So, at the Broadview Hotel, which is now the Broadview Towers. Yeah. So since 1951, Sigep has been on this campus. We have been thriving, also surviving sometimes, but we're still the best fraternity on campus for many reasons. So, yeah.
Who are some notable alumni part of either Phi Delta Chi or Sigep?
So that is a very good question. We do have several very notable alumni through our chapter. And I would venture to say that the normal person would not know who they are, but if you're a Sigep, you know who they are. And those people are Ed Hammond and Bob Hartsook also won a notable alumni award through our national fraternity. Essentially what these men did is, in order to win these awards, you have to do something outrageously kind and alternative in not just the fraternity, but also your field, your job, whatever it may be. I don't really know much about Bob Hartsook. That's on me. But I do know a lot about Ed Hammond. Ed Hammond left Emporia State University, got his doctorate, and then became the president of Fort Hays State University. He was the president there for, I want to say, like 30 years. It was a long time, long enough to have a whole building named after him. Now he's retired, but he still works at the university as like some sort of an assistant professor. I don't really understand. Diego Esparza, my pops, actually worked under him when he did his grad school at Fort Hays State University. So he's still around. He's still very big in this fraternity, and he's at literally every single national event you go to. It's funny seeing his face. He always wears this red jacket, which is reminiscent of our composite photos. So it's amazing. Yeah.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any fun facts before we cut the podcast?
Fun facts. Oh, I do have a fun fact. So during the 50s, when Sigep was trying to expand its grasps, you could say, they went to a lot of teachers' colleges. Well, Emporia State University was then the Kansas Teachers College. Kansas State Teachers College? Kansas State Teachers College. And we were actually the first teachers' college to have a Sigep.
Wow, that's crazy.
Isn't that very interesting? I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're the Epsilon chapter. So that means there's a Kansas Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta that are before us. And then there's also a Kansas Zeta, Eta, and Theta. So there are 7 Sigep chapters in Kansas. Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me on this podcast today,
Yeah,
Scott.
no problem. Let me know if there's anything else I can do for you, okay, Avery?
Thank you.